We're gonna be checking out all the extras today. Let's see. Concept art. The Glovey WIP. Global Concept art. The Love Tapper. Concept art. Fishmobile. Whoa. WIP. Funhouse Sea Urchins. WIP. Mother Jellyfish. Oh.
Love World was conceptualized quite a while after we began development of Around the Clock. It was about halfway through all of the levels, I'd say, around the ballpark there, when we had begun work on it, because we already had all of the house levels worked on, and a couple of other levels finished as well. Because Glove World is our humble beginning to this, tragic tale of woe and despair going on in Bikini Bottom, we had to take a more chaotic route. When I had to think of how the story was going to begin, I had to keep in mind the knowledge prior of the Jellians in terms of the SpongeBob lore. Because by that point, they already knew that the Jellians were a thing, and the Jellians were well aware of who exactly ended them during their first reign of terror. So Overlord, respectively, went to target SpongeBob and basically everyone in a singular cluster. So Glove World, what a prime opportunity, because it's also Squid's concert along with a firework display, so that would provide them perfect cover to swoop down and strike. So this level's treated more as an introductory, sort of yet chaotic scenario that you're kind of thrust into. And based on feedback, a lot of people liked that, so I cannot complain there.
Glove World was generally an easy level to make, I'd say. The whole theme park, the tunnel, all that was, it was pretty easy to make, I'd say.
It wasn't so much as smooth sailing with the maze. The maze is actually what we joke around with, one of the cursed levels of the game, because of how very fragile and delicate it is. We ran into quite a few problems while in development. Certain areas would end up stuttering, causing quite a large amount of lag and freezing. It wasn't optimized properly as a result. Now, in terms of cut content, it actually does relate with this as well, because originally, if you take a look at the concept art, there was originally a love tapper machine that would emerge from the ground, set itself up in 3 clicks, and if you were still around it while it was poised, it would slam down on you, crushing you. It would be another trap to add to the various other traps we have within the maze, but because of the lack of optimization, it would actually cause even more freezing than what we would have expected, so that had to be terminated.
You also can't forget the original jellyfish room, which used to feature a mother jellyfish instead of the red menaces that would fall down on you. The way it would work was that if you stepped on a pressure plate, the mother jellyfish would activate and zap the player.
Then, we originally had the sea urchin room have actual sea urchins, and when you stepped on them, they would permanently slow you down because they would stick onto your screen for an extended period of time. So it was more of a passive trap room, more so than anything. But the amount of sea urchins we had within the room also caused the game's optimization and frame rate to fail. So that had to be scrapped as well in favor of a harmless sea urchin column. As for our main stars of Glove World, Left and Right Glovey, Left Glovey being an original character designed by me, while Right Glovey is actually a character that exists in the show already, known as Glovey Glove. They were both designed to be nice, controllable threats as a first-timer experience, but we wanted to make them unique. We didn't want them to just chase the player around. So I tasked Dave with creating a almost Slender-like AI, minus the danger of looking at them.
Left and Right Glovey were generally pretty easy characters to make. When I made their AI, all site-based and such, I ran into a couple of issues with that. I had to use box triggers to be able to detect if the player was looking at the AI instead of a line trace or some sort of, different mechanic to detect if the Glovey was, in front of the player or not. Pretty much all that wasn't working, and I had to settle with box triggers, and it seemed to work out pretty well. The only problem I ran into when using box triggers were that it would go through walls, but it didn't seem to happen that often because they're pretty short radius of the box trigger. So all in all, I'd say that AI turned out pretty well.
I will say that I felt as if the map was poorly designed on my part to not show the player where they initially started, which did confuse playtesters and YouTubers alike. I will admit to that. With this said, this level was generally well received, and it was a pretty good introductory level that scared the absolute out of everyone who played it. And it was quite an enjoyable experience to watch and receive feedback. Honest feedback, might I add. I want to thank everyone who's done that during this development phase. Thank you so much.
Okay. That was really interesting. SpongeBob's Pineapple. Concept art, Doodle Patrick. Drawn to life, SpongeBob SquarePants. VIP Doodle Dad. VIP Kitchen Animation. Whoa! VIP The Doodle Gang. Looks cool. Okay. Concept art, Doodle.
The Pineapple was the 8th level to be conceptualized, and the 3rd home-oriented level at the time of its development. Just like Patrick and Squidward, I had to not only give the player something valuable to find, but also introduce an enemy that would be a reference from the show. Thus, the doodles were brought to the horror genre. Doodle Bob and Squid Drawing were from episodes like Frankendoodle and Doodle Dimension, while Doodle Patrick was from Drawn to Life SpongeBob SquarePants edition. Ironically enough, the relationship between the doodles reflects SpongeBob and Patrick's from the mid-seasons, whereas Patrick was abusive and SpongeBob would most likely accept the abuse.
However, I didn't necessarily agree that their presence within the Pineapple, let alone the story, was required. In response, Padre had convinced me to include them when he decided they would serve as a secondary antagonist within the game. When I designed the Pineapple, I was able to keep that feel that you were still in the Pineapple and not in some sort of mansion, by creating a sort of illusion when looking outside and seeing the same scenery downstairs and upstairs by duplicating the objects outside and making it seem like you were still seeing it from the same perspective. Once I finally nailed the design of the house, I moved on to the doodles. These scum were pretty interesting to design, with them being 2D characters instead of 3D like usual. The mechanics for these characters had to work just right. I didn't want to have 2 roaming enemies in such a small space, So I made Doodle Bob the only mobile threat in the house, and Doodle Patrick as an ambush-type enemy. We don't talk about Squid Drawing, though. That sad sap's only good for spawning Doodle Bob in the right places, and ending chases quickly.
Dave ran into a few problems while bringing these doodles to life. For instance, Doodle Bob was going to run to the player's location when Squid Drawing was stepped on, but due to a lack of technical know-how, and Dave being generally stupid.
What'd you say about me?
Cut that out. We instead favored the idea of an instant teleport, which would in turn reset as patrol. This soft reset would go on to aid players with their escape if they were caught.
Doodle Patrick is easily one of the more challenging enemies you'll encounter in the base game. Due to his unpredictable ceiling teleportation, we had to notify players of all trap points he could rest at. Safe to say that was a good decision between the both of us. This level is the hardest out of the 3 that were featured in the private demo, causing some to rage quit out of spite. I decided to reel back on Doodle Bob's speed a little bit and push his end chase spawn back into the study to make the level a little more fair for those who were struggling. We knew our limits when adding a sense of challenge to each level.
In other words, we had to think like a Sabali in order to tone down the difficulty curves of future levels. Not throwing shade on Omar. We like you, my dude. We like you.
Nah, not really.
Alright. Squidward's Monument. Artwork. Seaberry. Whoa. WIP. Big Lenny model. WIP living room. WIP draft door. Alright, draft decor. Something else.
The monuments are 7th level to come to life, a part of the quartet of protagonists' home-oriented levels. While Squidward's precious valuables were pretty obvious choices, based on references from the show, the level's enemy was a treat for some and a disappointment for others. Feeling as if the sea bear appears enough in the show, it was up to me to shine the spotlight on a character who had only appeared once in an in-episode portrait, and in Operation Krabby Patty as an enemy, and a personal favorite of mine, Big Lenny.
Yeah, Big Lenny was an interesting pick. When I didn't think he was going to reference as a full-on enemy, at the time, all of our previous enemies were given sharp edges and polygonal appearances, which matches my simplistic style seen in my other games. Podger convinced me to try rounded, more detailed edges and vertices for, creepier, more menacing characters such as Big Lenny. And from here, we began designing the interior of Squidward's monument, even featuring an elevator that only appeared in a few episodes, which in turn helped a lot of players.
Originally, Big Lenny was a lot like what Doodlebop would have been, a very fast enemy if you had been spotted, but we scrapped this idea of pure stealth in favor of a slower, mid-range foe. However, it was too easy to escape Big Lenny's clutches because every single item felt as light as a feather. A clever solution was to bring you to a crawl by disabling sprinting on certain items, and we had gone as far as to disable the elevator on the last item.
In the private demo, Big Lenny became a very unpredictable threat to some, and idiotic jellyfish to others. It was because of these tests that we couldn't really mess with his difficulty all that much, making the level pretty average between the time it takes to beat the level, how often a player would die, and how scary it could potentially be.
Yeah, these were a few factors that contributed to the labeling of difficulty settings for the average baseline playthrough of such a level.
Alright, Patrick's Rock. I'm excited for this. So I'm excited for Mr. Crafting. Patrick's sketch. It was Squidward. Concept. Yeah, I want to do that part of the link. WIP, the Lobos. WIP, Prowler Patrick Distortion. Concept art, Prowler. Concept art, Prowler Patrick. Unused sandals. Ooh, I'm not doing that, but I'll do it another time. I'll do that for its own video.
I wanted to try my hand at conceptualizing a level at this point in development, so I took the reins from Patrick's Rock, the 6th level developed for the game. Originally, I was going to reference Patrick's mirror image monster from Rule of Dumb, respectively, at a time where Patrick's character hit his low point in the show. But I decided to take a different route and make Evil Patrick, or Prowler Patrick, which became his finalized name. So pretty much the concept I had for the level was to make a trippy, dreamlike scenario where the landscape resembles his rock home, and it slowly degrades into some sort of twisted nightmare, where travel through like a bizarre version of the streets of Bikini Bottom, through the kelp dunes, and finally, the rocky highway.
When Dave presented the level to me, much to my surprise at the time, it wasn't a bad level. However, I found there were points where the level felt like a drag, perhaps too unfair. With my assistance, he was able to nerf the immense difficulty curve a little bit, which led to the creation of Prowler Pat, a hallucination as a result of the psychological battle between Patrick and the Prowler who ambushed him in his home. Prowler Patrick's speed was too fast to begin with, often cornering the player at dead ends, which were another problem at the time. His speed was decreased, and most dead ends were opened as alternative paths. The scrapped Sand Doors expansion level was completely redesigned to serve as the kelp dunes, with the shadow spawn coming much earlier than Prowler Patrick's appearance in this section in the summer. Finally, the sprint to the escape door was originally not timed, but felt too calming despite the intensity of the situation. Not only this, but the level was expanded to feature pirate ships from Robot Pirate Island, a reference to the Imagination Box, respectively. Coincidentally, the Prowler Jellium was conceptualized a bit after development of this entire level began, who would then go on to serve as one of the more annoying reoccurring enemies in the game.
Okay. I'm excited for this one. Artwork. The Scrooge Salbari. Here lives Scrooge Omar. He rage quit the doodles. Artwork. Baby girl, my girl. WIP. WIP living room. Oh. WIP Maso. Whoa. What was I saying? Mess hall. Yeah. Artwork. Beach.
Mr. Krabs. Poor Mr. Krabs. Quite the tragic hero. Mr. Krabs would serve as one of the key story components within Around the Clock, marking his beginning within the anchor. The concept was to have Mr. Krabs completely oblivious, as his mid-season character is, to the immediate dangers around him, despite obvious warnings. While completely aware of the Pinky, he doesn't know that his daughter's been kidnapped and cloned as a result. It's why Mr. Krabs is heartbroken to have to gun down an imitation of his daughter as she howls in pain. Deciding if the money is really worth it, we instead give his more caring side the spotlight, as he values the safety of his family and friends over some cash. I felt as if this was an appropriate step to have character development within the game, from a writing standpoint.
I began development of the house, which slightly differs from Padre's original house layout, but it was excused due to the leap of logic the show has when it comes to interior design in comparison to the exterior. From here, I created Pearl, and we set off to create the first sleeping enemy-oriented level.
Due to the original difficulty of the level being a pretty average experience based on player feedback, we decided to tone it down. Some floorboards were shuffled around so there weren't so many money blockades, and the speed of mobile enemies were reduced. At this point, the anchor was much easier to manage and appropriately labeled an easy level.
Well, I think we're gonna be done.